Hello and welcome back to another episode of Notion Bonsai, and today I'm going to be showing you how you can easily create a bonsai from a potentilla. So these are the two potentillas that we're going to be working on here today, and as you can see they are of slightly different varieties. One of them here has these beautiful vibrant yellow flowers, and the other one here has these beautiful white petaled flowers with yellow in the center. If I just take out this little label here that came with it, it says herbaceous perennial, and this other one here, Potentilla abbotswood. It says on the back here the flower color is white. The flowering, it flowers from May to September. And when it comes to the potentilla in bonsai, they're often overlooked as like a serious bonsai compared to things like junipers, maples and pines, as ultimately they are more of a shrub than a tree. But I think personally the potentilla has quite a lot of desirable characteristics, such as the nice flaky bark on it, which you'll see later in the video. It's got these beautiful small leaves, beautiful flowers, and it flowers for quite a long time throughout the summer. And then in the winter, just like maples, they lose their leaves and they're bare for that time. I'm going to work on both of these trees in this video, and let's start with the yellow flowered one. And the tools that we'll be using in this video today are some twig cutters or Satsuki shears, some bonsai tweezers, wire cutters, some gin pliers, and branch cutters. And the wire that I will be keeping on hand is some 2mm and 1.5mm aluminium bonsai wire. And as I have said before in many of my other videos, by no means do you need all of these specialized tools to do bonsai. Whenever I got started in bonsai, I simply got by with a cheap pair of garden scissors and a pair of secateurs. These particular tools just sort of help make the job easier. Just make sure that the scissors that you do use are clean and sharp. Clean so that there's no fungal problems with the tree, and sharp because in bonsai, and even pruning any plant, the sharper the cut and the cleaner the cut, the easier the tree will heal. And I think as a proof of concept to not needing all of these tools, today I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to work on this first tree without the specialized tools of bonsai to stay true to my word of not needing all of these. And then whenever we come around to the second tree, this one here, we can then switch back to using these tools. And the ordinary tools that I will be using on this first tree here today are some cheap garden scissors, and these actually have a spring missing in the middle, and these are just some ordinary secateurs. I'm also going to use these bonsai wire cutters, as I don't have a standard pair of like ordinary wire cutters, but wire cutters can be got at any hardware store. Because both potentillas that we're going to be working on in this video are in full leaf, they've got all their leaves out, they're even flowering, now is really not an ideal time to be repotting these trees, taking them out of the soil and putting them into a different pot, because the trees are actively growing. Ideally, the best time to repot a potentilla would be late winter, early spring, like the majority of bonsai trees. And for that reason today, we're not going to be repotting this tree. All we're going to do is work on the foliage. I am, however, going to take the tree out of the pot just to see what we are working with. I'm not trying to disturb any of the roots or anything like that. I simply want to reveal just the top layer of soil, so that I can determine the best front of the tree, as by removing the top layer of soil, I'll be able to see more of the root flare and the barry at the base of the trunk here. And here's another homemade tool that you can do on a budget. I actually still use this today. Instead of using a bonsai root rake, you can easily use a fork, and I find it to be really useful. I'm just going to take the fork and rake the top layer of soil. And as I rake the soil, what I'm trying to do is see where this trunk here begins. When it comes to repotting potentilla like this, I would say to repot them every 2 to 3 years. Repotting every year could put too much stress on the tree. You want to let them thin, fibrous roots grow into the new soil. And I find that the roots on a potentilla are quite similar to that of an azalea. And as you can see here now, I have found where the trunk begins. At the bottom here, there's a nice root flare. And before I start shaping and styling, I would like to decide on a front of this tree. As you consider the front of your tree, don't be afraid to take the tree, turn it all different angles, because we can always change the planting angle later. For example, this tree could make a cascade, plant it like this. You could even plant it right down like that in a cascade pot. Of course, you would need to do some rearranging of the roots to get them to go into the pot. But I think it's really good to consider all your options, and for me, I think this right here is quite a good front because it's got branches on either side here. It's got a nice flare at the base and it's got a beautiful lean and curve on the trunk that I think is the best viewing angle for the tree. Looking at the trunk of the tree, I think this branch is a little bit too low. I could make it work, but there are branches up higher that I would like to wire down and fill the space of this one. And for that reason, I'm going to remove this one and have this branch here as the first branch coming up the trunk. So I'm going to start with these little bonsai scissors. I hope they're still sharp. That cut was not the cleanest. I think I just used the scissors wrong. They're cutting pretty cleanly now. It takes a little time to get used to this from using bonsai tools. This branch could be wired out like that. If I turn this tree around, there's quite a lot going on back here. Perhaps that would make an even nicer front there. Still sort of changing my mind on this. Maybe this is a possible front. It's got a nice line going from there. And this back branch here could be considered a branch that would compete with the trunk line. So I could get rid of this back branch, which I'm going to do. I'm going to use the secateurs for this. I'll start by shortening it. It's quite a lot to take off. I could cut in very close with these secateurs and remove that stump. But another option is to leave that stump and hope you get small branching from that if you wanted to have foliage further down. It's just an option. Personally, I don't like that idea, but it's good to consider. Bonsai tools definitely make the job a lot easier, but this is still working. Just for certain cuts like this is a great example of why the branch cutters are so useful. Like, I cannot get in there with these secateurs. I really can't get in there with these, not in the way that it should be cut. I may come back later and fix this up with branch cutters, but for now, I'll leave it like that. So we have a single trunk now on this tree. I quite like this angle as a front. As you can see the movement coming up the tree, we follow it, it splits. I think I would like this to come that way, like that, and this can come over this way. Oh yeah, the part that I cut off had that beautiful yellow flower on it. I'm not going to waste this. I'm going to stick this in a glass of water and keep it in my house until it wilts. I just don't like to see flowers go to waste. So I'm going to start with the 2mm wire. I think this is the sufficient wire for wiring these thicker branches up here. I'm going to start by measuring the wire up here, cut it with the wire cutters. Now, if you're new to bonsai and you have not wired a tree ever before, there's a thing we do called the 2-branch principle, and that is essentially wiring 2 branches on the tree to each other with one piece of wire. And the reason behind doing this is so that each branch is anchored to the other. Otherwise, if the branch was wired on its own, it wouldn't really hold the branch, and there you can get problems where the wire twists around the branch and it takes the bark off and rings it. And then unfortunately, if that happens, that branch will die off because the sap flow can't reach the foliage. So this is really one of the fundamentals of bonsai, that it's really good to learn the 2-branch principle. The 2 branches that I will be wiring together are this branch here and this branch coming up here. So I'm going to start by taking the wire and pushing it through one of the elbows like this. And I'm going to come up this branch, and I want to make sure there's enough wire on this end here. I'm just going to twist it around, coming up the branch. It takes a little bit of time when you're getting started with it. And whenever you wire, you want each coil of the wire to be at about a 45-degree angle, like that. Continue going up the branch until you get to the end. And then once this branch is wired, I'm going to go around the back here so that it's anchored. If you feel that it isn't holding tight enough here, it's okay to go around the trunk once and then come up the branch. But here, I feel this is anchored well enough. And then I'm going to bring it around this branch. And again, that 45-degree angle on the branch. You want to have it fairly tight, not too tight where you're going to crush the branch, but tight enough that you know it's going to hold it. When you get to an area where the branch then begins to split off into thinner branches, what I like to do is then come up the thickest one of them branches until the wire runs out. The ends of the branches are a lot more delicate than the thicker parts of the branches nearer the trunk. Instead of making it super tight when you get to the end, I like to do what's known as an open coil. Just coil it loosely around the branch so that it's more guiding the branch into the direction of growth. So I just like to curl it like that. What I mean by 45-degree angle when it comes to wiring is every twist and turn of the wire, you want to be roughly 45 degrees as you come up the branch. Even here, that's a little bit too spaced out. You also would like an even distance between each one of the coils. If I continue to wire up this chopstick, these are slightly closer together than the coils down here. If there is a slight variation, that's okay, but you want to try and keep your wiring fairly consistent. In bonsai, not every time do we wire at absolute 45-degree angles. Sometimes, if you would like a tighter bend, it's okay to give your wire a little bit of a tighter coil, like that. That's only in rare cases. If you wired branches like this, it probably wouldn't even hold the branch. And again, for the opposite, if you wired branches like this where the coils are super spaced apart, it definitely wouldn't hold your branch. You can even take a chopstick like this and practice your wiring before you go and wire branches. Or if you have cut branches off of a tree and you don't really mind if they get destroyed, you could practice your wiring on them. So I'm just going to continue to wire the rest of this tree till I have all of the branches or the majority of the branches wired so that I can then manipulate them and give them a shape. That's really all there is to most of bonsai, is wiring trees, giving them shapes. There is some scientific knowledge and horticultural knowledge that makes bonsai a little bit easier so you can really understand what you're doing. But if you're just getting started, I think it's good to just stick to the basics and the principles. And then later, if you're interested, you can learn all the other things. So just bend this branch down to see how it's looking. Oh, that really works, doesn't it? Let's get some more wire on this. And I'm going to switch to this, which is 1.5 mil wire. I used to use 1mm wire for bonsai, but over time I have found that 1mm is simply not strong enough to hold even branches like this. And when you do bonsai, it's quite important to visualize the entirety of the tree. You don't want to get sort of focused in your mind on one part of the tree or the branches. You want to look at it as an entire composition in the end. And by doing that, it can really help you in designing the tree, because every tree that you work on will inevitably have some sort of flaw to it. And I think people can get really caught up in the flaws of their trees and they get too focused in that area and they prune it way back, and before you know it, you've got nothing left and you have to wait quite a long time before you can really start growing the tree again. As I work on this tree, I can see there is quite a few aphids or greenfly crawling around on the tree. So when it comes to pests on the potentilla, most of the time, all you will really see is greenfly, maybe the odd caterpillar. And when it comes to treating them, you can simply take the caterpillars off of the tree, maybe put them somewhere else in your garden. And then to treat the aphids on the tree, you can use a dilute solution of soap and water. Or if you wish to also, you can spray it with a pesticide. And I can see it does have quite leggy growth at the moment. Potentillas backbud really easily, so whenever we give this a prune, it should be no problem of pushing back that leggy growth. You see, whenever you prune the ends of branches in the potentilla or most trees, this tells the tree to send out backbuds further in. It wakes up the dormant buds in there. Also, pruning the growth on the outside allows light to reach the inner parts of the tree, which helps it backbud even more. So I've got some wire on this tree now. Let's see if we can give it a shape. And I'm going to be very careful when I wire these branches as they are a little bit prone to snapping. So I'm going to wire this down, listening for cracking noises. There's just some branches back here that I'd like to get rid of. They're growing in weird directions. There's a branch here that is growing in towards the center of the tree. And for that reason, I'm going to take that one out right here. I haven't got any wire on this main branch here, so I'm going to wire that also. And this part of styling bonsai is really where your own creative intuition comes into play. There are some principles that you can follow, but ultimately it's down to what you like it looking like. And if you like something, why not make it? So I have wired up this branch here, and I'm going to come around this branch. Or maybe I could get rid of this branch altogether. Let's see if I can get rid of that. I think it's grown in a weird spot. This one also. They're all growing towards the center. So if I bend these ones down, just to fill in the space down here. And then I can bend this one over this way, just to give it a little bit of interest and movement. Bend it back again. And the more that I look at this on the camera, I can see that that middle branch just doesn't belong anymore here. So I'm going to cut right through that with the wire cutter and everything. And still, there's a lot going on back here also. We don't need that. A lot of dead branches on this tree we can cut off. There's a lot of branches coming from the one spot. I'm just explaining my thought process as I prune so that you can apply these principles to your own trees. And now I'm thinking we wouldn't even need this branch here as it's right beside that one. And I think to find a potentilla like this one here that I have found with a single trunk in a pot, as thick as it is kind of rare when it comes to like finding them in garden centers. They're normally planted as a little shrub in a small pot. So if you do see one with this thickness of trunk and you think it would look good as a bonsai, by all means get it, give it a go. They almost make instant bonsai. I'm cutting in pretty close. Again, at the back of the tree here, there is 1, 2, 3 branches emanating from the one spot. I don't really want to keep all of these, as I feel the tree over time, as this area swells and thickens, you'll get what's known as inverse taper. And that is just that, inverse taper, where it swells here. And it's not really attractive in bonsai, so I'm going to unwire this here again. It's okay to change your mind with decisions that you make in bonsai also. You may plan something with a tree, be working on it for many years, and then suddenly discover you don't like what you've done anymore. You might find something else that works better. Let's just cut this. And with that, I'm now going to give this a little profile cut just to keep the tree from growing out and out and out over time and to encourage more back budding. These trees are quite vigorous and can handle a good prune so long as you don't work on the roots at the same time. So I'm just going to show you the planting angle. I'm going to put the wire underneath here to show you that's how it's going to be in the pot. As this is a first styling, of course it's not going to look as good as I'd like it to. Again, thinking about the overall shape of the tree, I'm always leaving some green on the branch. So if I cut that there, so long as there is a little bit of green on the end, the sap will continue to flow. Never do I want to cut a branch and leave no foliage on it like that. That would surely die off. I'm going to leave this tree at that. That one's growing just under everything. I don't think it belongs there. I'm pretty happy with this as a first styling. I think over time now, this will back bud, send out a lot more branches for us to work on. And in another couple of years, this tree should look pretty great. I'm going to plop this back into the same pot. And now moving on to the second tree, which I think is a lot better of a tree. It's got a much thicker trunk down here, a lot more to work with. Look at all of this foliage, and the flowers on it are just stunning. Earlier today, I seen a few bees coming over and taking the pollen from all of these little flowers. So if you like bees in your garden, this could be quite a nice bonsai to have also. So just like the last tree, I'm going to take it out of the pot and see what we have to work with just below this upper soil level. Still going to use the bent fork as I find it to be quite a useful tool. Breaking away, this is coming off pretty easily. A good tip for if you're repotting bonsai or you want to loosen the soil, if you just let the tree dry out for a few days, the soil comes away pretty easily. Even as I rake this top layer of soil off also, I'm not crossing and trying to pull from back here, always raking radially from the trunk, even if you are just loosening up the top layer of soil. Always remember the bonsai principles. I'm going to take the root rake here, just use that. I think what we have here is quite a nice nabari. We didn't need to reveal that much to find it. We can come back next spring and really refine the nabari, get rid of the crossing roots and roots that I don't really like to make it even better. But again, all we're doing today is working on the foliage. There is one branch that's kind of stopping me from deciding on a good front as it's crossing everything and in the way. And the branch is right here. As you can see, the trunk goes up nicely and then it just, at a right angle, juts off to the side here. So before I decide on a front, I'm going to remove this big problem branch. And I'm just coming in here with the branch cutters. Take that out. I'm going to remove it right into the very trunk here. There's another one here, it was connected to it. And I think that lets me see now more of what's going on, and even gives us this as a potential front where it splits nicely. Just cleaning up some of the branches I think aren't really in good spots. Like this one here, as you can see, it's got a little sucker growing down there. I don't want that at the moment. And if I look really close at this, I can see it is absolutely covered in aphids. On the trunk here, I can see that there is 2 branches growing quite close together. And if I let these grow any longer, we'll get a swelling in this area here. And I would like to pick one of them to keep. Now, when it comes to deciding on a branch to keep, in a scenario like this, it's good to consider the front of the tree, which branch is stronger. But the reason why I have decided to remove this one is because this is the front of the bonsai and it's just in the way. So if I cut this here, you can see now more of the trunk line. Moving up the trunk of this tree, you can see there's quite a lot going on. There is 1, 2, 3, and then 4 this back branch. All these branches are coming from this one spot down here, which is quite okay for now. We can let them grow if we wish to, but there's just this back one here which I feel is a little bit too thick in comparison to the base of the trunk down here. So to make it look like this tree tapers better, where it goes from thick to thinner branches, I'm going to remove this back branch. We'll start off by just cutting it here. And we're going to come in with the branch cutters just to get rid of this little stump. And again, this is the beauty of the branch cutters that secateurs really struggle doing. I'm just going to cut this here. If I'd recommend any tool for anyone starting bonsai as their first tool, it would be the branch cutters. That's a nice flush cut there now. I think what I'm going to do is wire this thicker branch down in this fashion, and this branch is simply going to be in the way. So for that reason, I'm getting rid of this one also. There's a couple of little back buds down here we don't need either. Starting to look a lot more simple. Sometimes in bonsai, less is more. So you get rid of all the little shoots and congestion that's going on, and you'll have, most of the time, a nicer looking tree. I'm going to wire this branch to this one. So I've wired these two branches, and that's really to just get this branch a little bit more of a curve to it. Being very gentle with these thicker branches as they're a little bit more brittle. And just so that this branch holds even nicer, I'm going to have two pieces of wire go up it. I'm just doubling up the wire and following the same path as the last wire. And you can really take your time with wiring. Wiring does not by any means have to be a stressful thing. I'm debating whether or not I need this branch in the middle. As you can see, it sort of ruins that silhouette where you can see through the tree. And if at any point I'm working on a tree and I think it might not work, that's a good indication that it really doesn't work and we don't need it. See, look how that opened that up. And this one up here, that's not even needed, is it? Let's shorten that. As long as there's some foliage on the branch, it's okay. If you twist the wire and the branch as you bend, you can spread and distribute the pressure evenly across the branch. That way it's less likely to break. Grab it with your hand across the whole branch, and it's a lot easier to just spread the energy across. See how much bend we got into that now? And bring this little branch down, just to give it a little bit of interest. That's looking lovely. This one, what do we do with this? We don't need it. Let's get rid of that. Less is more. And it really does look spectacular with the beautiful flowers on this up here. Now I'm going to wire this branch even lower down here. So I've got it wired right to the end there. So now that allows us to just twist the branch, again grabbing all of the branch, bringing it down. It's a little bit long on this side, so I'm just going to cut it there with the wire cutters right through everything. And I'm pretty happy with that. All I did was prune it into that classic bonsai triangle shape, just to see how it would look in a nice bonsai pot. You can sort of get an idea there of what it's going to look like next spring when we repot it. And of course by then, all of this foliage will have thickened out also. Let's give this tree water. I'm just putting a little bit of compost in here, just to top it up, as we exposed some of them surface roots earlier. If you would like to take cuttings, it's quite easy to do so. You can propagate them by cuttings in two methods. You can either take a heel cutting or a nodal cutting. A heel cutting is when you take a branch off of a thicker branch and break it like this. This end here is what's known as a heel. Take some scissors, clean up the end, remove all of the lower leaves, and then all you have to do is dip this in some hormone rooting powder and then dip it into soil. And preferably, if you can, get a hormone rooting powder with the active ingredient IBA, also known as indole-3 butyric acid. And then a nodal cutting is when you take a branch and you see this little small branch coming from it. You cut just below there, remove some of the lower branches, and then again dip this in some hormone rooting powder into soil, and it should root. From as far as I know, it is quite easily to air layer a potentilla, but I have never done it before, so I'm not too sure. If anyone in the comments has done it before and it's worked successfully, leave your tips and suggestions down below. And on that, I'm going to end off this video right here. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like down below. It really helps out the channel a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And let me know down in the comments what you thought of this video. Is there anything that you would do differently? I'm always open to new and different ideas. If you would like to support the things that I do on this channel, hit the thanks button down below. And if you would like to stay updated on all of the things that I do off camera, please follow me on Instagram. It's @NotionBonsai, and you'll be able to see all of the things that I do on there. But on that, thank you so very much for watching.